Sounded Good is filled with opinions, and though these opinions may be shared with fervor and conviction, they remain in essence opinion only. What About Ameobi and JayRayGun do not represent PGA Tour 2K21, 2K Sports, TGC Tours, or any other company, group, or individual mentioned or insinuated. We're just two guys with too much time on our hands. Welcome to
Sounded Good. All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the Sounded Good podcast, featuring myself, What About Ameobi, and...
Hello, this is JayRayGun.
So in our last podcast, we talked about TGC Tours. We talked about its dual roles, its history, where it's come from, where it is now. We got really in depth into a lot of its different roles and a lot of the history of it. And so we had some things planned for that episode that, well, they're going to be part of this episode now because we went a bit long. So this week, we're going to talk about do's and don'ts for new designers. And I'm going to try to give it from the point of view strategy, which is kind of what I'll do, and then more the technical creating a golf course, which is what JayRay is going to do. So we'll start with JayRay. JayRay, what's your first do?
Yeah, so, even though mine are coming from more the design side, I do want to caveat, as I guess we kind of should, and we kind of do at the beginning of every episode, we're just two guys having some fun with this game, and we're certainly not, I think, experts with what we talk about, which, when you talk about different things like maybe fantasy football or, hell, even some more popular, sports broadcasts like that, a lot of those guys aren't experts either, But we put in the time, we put in the research, and we give our opinions, and there's reasoning behind our opinions. So it's up to you, the listener, to kind of take these on board. So my very first do, and this is really more for newer designers. These are for designers that are just starting out. You've been playing the game for a while. You've seen these new courses. You think you have some good ideas for a course you'd like to see. And so you pop into the designer for the first time, and now you're wondering kind of where to go from here. And then there are some, designers maybe put out a couple of courses. Maybe they haven't gotten approved like they've wanted to in TGC, or maybe they haven't gotten the amount of plays that they've wanted to. And so they're looking to maybe take that next step and what can I do differently? So that's where, I'm coming from here. For you established designers and for you guys that know what you're doing, I mean, you know what you're doing. You probably don't need to take my advice, but you might be able to get a couple of grains of wisdom from out of here. So my very first do is keep it simple. Okay. In the beginning, don't try and set out to create the top course in the game. Right? This is going to be the course that everyone wants to play and everyone wants to schedule for their societies. And I'm going to get a call from 2K Sports and HB Studios, and they're going to want to, put my course in the next official game. You don't want to take that on before you really have a grasp of the designer and the tools available to you. What you really want to do is keep it simple and focus on creating a cohesive, playable 9 holes, which is a good start. Or if you want to go full 18, do full 18. But it's much more important to create a course that doesn't make people scratch their heads too much at the design elements of it, rather than trying to create, the next in-game Augusta, or the next game that people, or the next course that people are just gushing about because it's your first course, and you're not going to be able to have that sort of impact right out the gates unless you are just a savant and you figured this stuff out. But for most of us, me especially, I took so long publishing my first course because I went through so many different iterations of courses before it, because I started out wanting to do, huge, features and dramatic elements and all this. And I really had to pare it down before I knew what I was really doing and kind of build myself back up that way. So that's my first piece of advice to you is keep it simple.
Well, and just to follow up on that, I think that's one area where the design league on TGC Tours is such a great thing because it's 6 holes. And it kind of in a lot of ways forces you to kind of keep things simple because there's restraints on what you're allowed to do, right? Particularly the most recent one where you weren't allowed to have more than 10 foot of elevation throughout your entire property. I thought that was a great one because a lot of new designers will have like 300-foot drops and whatever. And so it really, so that's something to look into as well. If you don't want to take on the full 18, a night like 6 holes, get a lot of feedback, it can be a
Definitely.
good way to start too.
Definitely.
My first do is again, so from the strategy end of it and where I'm coming from, I'd love to tell you how many courses I've played in this game. I have no idea. It's in the hundreds for sure. It's easily in the hundreds. From all the courses I played on stream and the societies I've played in and the TGC tours, uh, tour events that I've played in, it's hundreds. Okay. So there's just certain things that I've noticed and certain things that I've enjoyed about courses and certain things I haven't. And so that's where my list is coming from. So my first do is give multiple options to play a hole. And I'm especially looking at second shots into par fives. One of the things I really dislike about a hole is if it is just you have to hit driver and then you have to hit this shot to this place, and that's the only way you can play it. I like it when I stand on the tee virtually and I can look at the hole and go, well, I could do this, or I could do this. If I do this, then that'll leave me this. If I do this, that leaves me this. If it's a par 5 and I try to take this on, then maybe I can get there in 2. And if I don't make it, then I'm going to do this. So just having that overall kind of, again, like say multiple options and not just being shoestrung into you have to hit it here and hit it here. And then if you don't, well, then you're hooped. So yeah, that's my biggest one is try to make the hole interesting by giving more options and just kind of piggyback on that. Don't be afraid to give some width, give some opportunities for angles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's maybe something that a new designer starts doing without knowing it's maybe not the best thing to do, in that they're creating holes that are drive, approach, putt, drive,
Mm-hmm.
approach, putt. It's a straight line hole. Not meaning it's a straight hole, but like you said, you have limited choices about where to go, and either that's because you got 15-yard wide fairways,
Right.
or there's nowhere else to put your ball other than the perfect shot. So I think that's a great thing to start out with. My second do is start with what you know. Okay, and it's ambitious to try to recreate something like your home course or your favorite course when you first start out, but it's good practice as you get into the designer and get used to the tools. It's good practice to try and recreate a hole or two that you know very well in your head, and you can see it in your head and in your imagination. And so that's good practice for you when you start designing your own golf courses from scratch. It's good practice to be able to take what you see in your head and transfer it to the course, because in the game, in the designer, because you'll find sometimes that what you see in your head or even what's out there in real life is really hard to pull off in the designer. I mean, there are some things like pot bunkers or like
Mm-hmm.
really, jagged edge, craggy bunkers, certain, green shapes and slopes don't translate real well. And so there are some things that you have to, give and take on in the designer uh, to really match your imagination. And so trying to take something that you have a course that you play over and over, and the fifth hole par 3 by heart. Take that and try to build that into your course and give yourself some practice using those different tools to raise the elevation or really slope the green in a realistic way.
Yeah, and you mentioned like home course. I mean, how many times have we seen somebody try to recreate a course that's out there and you play the course and then you look at the website of the course and you go, they're not really that close at all.
Oh yeah.
Like there's bunkers here that aren't on your course, or yeah. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense too.
Mm-hmm.
My second do is give players a chance to recover from a poor drive. Doesn't mean that you need to make it where the drive doesn't matter, because I don't agree with that at all. But I'm looking at the 510-yard par 4 that's a forced carry to the green, where if you miss the fairway, you're going to have to leave yourself 150 yards in for a third shot. Like it's literally just chop it out. Like we're playing US Open circa 1986. I don't find that particularly fun, frankly, is what it comes down to. When I play courses, I don't worry. Like I'm not that bothered about what score I shoot. I have enjoyed extremely difficult golf courses just as much as I've enjoyed extremely easy golf courses. But what I don't like is when there's that kind of all or nothing, you have to hit exactly this shot. Otherwise, you cannot play the hole now, or you can't even think about getting to the green in regulation. So, and I think one of the things that might happen is a designer kind of gets in their mind, here's how the hole should be played. And they don't think about the fact that I might not play it that way because I might look at that hole differently. I probably will look at it differently because I'm coming from a different point of view. And so I also feel like when you have an opportunity to recover from a poor shot, it creates a bit of excitement in the hole. It creates excitement in the round. And if you think in real life, you don't see highlights of a guy chopping it out of the rough, leaving himself 150 into a par 4. You see highlights of Mickelson in a bunker, hitting it through the little gap in the trees, right? And he pulls it off. Or you see highlights of he's trying it and he drills a tree dead on. So for me, one of the best US Open I've ever seen was a 1999 US Open at Pinehurst. And there's two reasons for it. First one is the leaderboard was great. You had Payne Stewart, Phil Mickelson, Tiger finished a shot back of them. So Stewart won by a shot. Mickelson was second, a shot back. Tiger was a shot back in third. Vijay Singh was in there. Duvall played a part of it in early on. So there's a lot of great names, but it was the course. And it was the first time in basically recent memory at that time that a US Open allowed people to take shots at greens from the rough, because the rough was, instead of being 5 inches, it was like 2 or something. And then you combine that with the greens that they had, those upside down turtle greens, and you saw some just wild stuff where the player was tempted into trying to knock it on the green when maybe it wasn't the best idea, where maybe they would have been better off laying up and having a full wedge in rather than being off the back of the green. And now they've got to, chip it to an area like this. It just made it so much more exciting, and it was still difficult. The winner was 1 under.
Oh yeah. Those US Open scores get that way.
Yeah, but it was a great to watch because hitting the fairway, there was a definite premium for it. You had a much easier shot because you could actually spin the ball, but you weren't just hacking it out of the rough. If you hit it in the rough, you had a chance to try to get up either on the green or near it. And there was a lot of really cool shots that were played that just made it riveting to watch. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. We're giving people a chance to recover from par 4s. It allows that excitement. It allows people to have that chance to play the hole a slightly different way and maybe a bit more difficult way, but still be able to play it.
Yeah, absolutely. There are people that play this game that if they don't go out and shoot a 58 or 59 every round, they're not having fun. But I think that is, a vast minority of players. I think most players want to be challenged, and a challenge more so is recovering well from a bad shot, not necessarily, being punished twice for a bad shot. Once, because now you're in the rough, and, 2, because now you're, maybe you'll get par, but you don't really have a chance to, get on the green. So you're really going to have to tighten up. So yeah, letting players, have that choice to recover is much more exciting than just being punished once you see the ball leave the tee.
Yeah.
My third, again, going back to design and newer designers and kind of taking what you see in your mind and putting it into the game, I would suggest sketching out a couple of hole designs or a perspective routing on paper before you go in. You don't have to draw out your whole course. You don't have to really even be, detailed beyond, I want my tee to start here and I want my green here, and this is kind of my intended line of play. But the reason I say that is because, a lot of times people will be inspired by a course they see in the game or a hole they see from a golf course they've never seen before, or they say, I have an idea for the way I would like a golf hole to play. and it's great, and they get in the designer and maybe they build it out, but they struggle really making that one element cohesive with the rest of their course. And so if you get in and you sketch out a couple of holes with how you want them to play, and look, you got a certain shape you want your bunkers, you got a certain width, you kind of want to keep your fairways, green shapes, things like that. It can help you in your first couple of holes to really get a good cohesiveness to your course that you can then transfer to the rest of it, so that when you finally get to your full 18, even though you haven't sketched out your whole course, it feels like you had a good plan going into it, because it doesn't feel like 18 individual holes. It feels like someone, a golf course architect, looked at this plot of land and picked out the best place to put the holes in the land and came with a plan. And I think that's the best thing about some of these courses, is that whether you're playing hole 1, hole 11, or hole 18, it feels like the same course.
Yeah.
A lot of newer design courses that I see struggle with that, where you're getting kind of a mix of a lot of different elements throughout. And, at the end of your round, it instead of being memorable, everything just kind of fades and you don't really remember anything specific about your round.
Yeah, for sure. And keeping that consistency. So yeah, having that plan. A course that I keep championing that I think did a great, 2 courses that did great jobs of that recently: Sussex Downs by Digital Bunny, and Cape Clements by Heisenberg, where it looks like exactly what you said, that there was a plot of land and then they routed a course around it, which was awesome. And yeah, it's something we really appreciate. Number 3 for me: do play test in various conditions to ensure your hole plays as intended. And an example of that is par 4s being reachable in all conditions. How many times have we played a hole where we're like, okay, if we play this hole into the wind, can we get there?
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
there's a lot of times you'll hear the designer, if you're talking to the designer as well. It's like, well, it's reachable if you got the wind behind you.
Yep.
Like,
Well, and last I checked, we don't have it. Maybe in the game we do, but in real life, you don't have control over the wind. There's a prevailing wind here in southwestern Ontario. This time of year, we can expect a westerly, maybe southwest wind if it's warm, right? But it's not always that way.
right.
And so your course still has to be playable when you don't get the wind you're expecting. But also things like the fairway firmness, the green firmness, the green speed. There is a bit of controversy, and this is where my opinion will be a little different. I think within reason, your course should be playable in just about any condition. I understand not every course is designed to be played at the very fast green speed. And I can kind of go, okay, well, yeah, but at least it should be able to be played at fast. And it should be able to play it at slow.
Yeah.
Maybe not the very slow and very fast. I'll give you that one. But I think that and especially if you're aspiring to have your course be played on TGC tours, they're going to want to crank the speeds up. They're going to want to crank the winds up. They're going to want to crank the firmness up. So you're going to need to make a course ideally that can handle that. And so one thing some guys will do, I know something you do, Jay, is they'll design when they do design the course, they'll have the greens at very fast, so they know that they can handle it, and then they can always tone it down a bit. But at the very least, make sure you're play testing and playing shots to all of your pins as well. When we had the rookie contest, we had one course where there was a hole that was on a red slope. I think it was even in default, but when you made it to very fast, forget it. And that was only one bump up.
Yeah.
But I had a putt where I was like 10 feet. It came up 6 inches short and rolled right back down to me. So
yeah. I've played those before.
And all that is just play tests, play to that pin, and you would catch that, and you'd be like, oh, hang on, I need to calm that down. But yeah, just make sure that you've played the course and all the conditions to make sure the course plays how you're intending it to.
Yeah, and when you talk about intentions, one thing a designer needs to understand is that even though you have intentions, and let's say you do, just like Wayne said, and you go through your play testing and you have everything matching your intentions, there are going to be players out there that, either through condition changes or through the way they play the game or whatever, may not play as you intended. And they may critique your course because of that. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where it comes down to. You have to, when you get critiques like that, you really have to say, okay, well, how are they playing it? Were they playing it, in very, very high winds, very fast conditions, which, you know, you can play in, and it's certainly conditions that you see out there. But that doesn't mean that your hole was bad or it was badly designed. It just means that in those particular conditions, it might not play as easy. But, as you were talking about, you'd like a course to be playable in all conditions. I think, as you said, if you want your course to play as intended, you have that drivable par four. Even if that means that drivable par four becomes easy in a wind behind you, that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you need to lengthen it, or put some hazards in the way or something and change it to make that one time when the wind's behind the player harder. Because what you're doing is you're making all the other times when that wind is not behind them, making that harder. And so now all of a sudden
Yeah.
your reachable par four becomes not reachable in any conditions because you try to tailor to one
Right.
condition.
Yeah, and the other thing too is just also looking at difficulty levels people are playing at, keeping that in mind. And I think it's important to kind of be like, okay, so my intention for this course is for it to be played at this difficulty. And then if you're submitting it to TGC Tours, it's going to be important to realize that's Masters,
Mm-hmm.
that's Master difficulty, right? There's the beer league, but then everything else at TGC Tours is played at Master difficulty. So yeah, maybe on Pro or Pro Am, you can hit that 10-yard wide split fairway that gives you a chance to get at the green. But when we're playing on Master, maybe we're not using the full length driver,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe we're just not confident in hitting that shot. And so yeah, that's something that I, as somebody who reviews courses, I reviews courses on my channel, not for TGC Tours, but me giving critiques, that's something I would point out and say, I'm never going for that shot. There's
Yeah.
no way I'm ever pulling it off.
Or you've designed your greens at 144 speed, and so now your plateau green, which played okay, now you put it up to master, and all of a sudden you have a 2.5 foot elevation change from your plateaus, and there's no way to get there if you
Yeah.
happen to miss an approach shot. That comes down to play testing, yeah, which is a big part of the design process. And actually, kind of in that same area, my fourth do for new designers is have patience. Okay, there are very few great courses published on a designer's first try. Okay, and those first few publishes that are great from a new designer still will have tens to hundreds of hours. And when I say tens, I don't mean 20, I don't mean 30. I mean in the 60, 70, 80 range, in the lower level of hours spent on a course that receives, praise and adulation and all that from a new designer. And that means that they have probably, before they've worked on that course, spent another few hundred hours just building random courses and really practicing with those tools. And so new designers have to understand that designing a golf course, even a virtual one, it can be fun and gratifying, but can also be a painstaking undertaking. Okay. And depending on the platform that you're designing on, PC, a high end top level PC is the easiest to design on because the designer, it's based on the game, based on the engine that the game is built on, it can have some lag associated with it whenever you're dropping in your trees and your elements and all that. I started designing on PS4. The whole reason I got a PC, honestly, and this is kind of sad when you think about it, but the whole reason I got a PC was to design in this game because I could not take the lag on the PS4. And it's only 2.5 seconds between when you click the button to put down a tree and when that tree finally shows up. But you extrapolate that over the hundreds of trees that you have to plant sometimes or other elements, and you're starting to talk about hours of time that are, frankly wasted waiting on the game. So I get the frustration with new designers when they start, especially on these consoles or heaven forbid the Switch.
Poor Charlie.
Yeah. I mean, congratulations to the few guys out there that do design and design very, very well on a Switch, because man, you might as well be wearing a hair shirt and whipping yourself, because that is masochism at its largest. I mean, I could not put myself through that. But
No.
don't get impatient and then rush to the finish. You're starting to get your planting in, but you're getting tired of putting these trees down, and you don't want to do it anymore. And so you figure, okay, I won't plant my water lines, or I won't plant between my holes here. I'll just raise some hills up or whatever. And you rush to the finish. And when you put out that product, it looks unfinished. And especially if you've taken your time, maybe you've gone hole by hole, and so you're playing through, and you're like, man, this course looks pretty good. And then you make the turn at number 9, and the back 9, looks nothing like the front 9. You're like, wait a minute, that pond there, the one on the front had all this cool planting stuff. This one's empty. Where'd all the trees go?
Mm-hmm.
There's no rough anymore. And it's because some people, can get frustrated putting out a course with the time it actually takes. It can surprise a lot of people. Bottom line with this, with have patience, is if you feel yourself getting burned out. Burnout is a thing that happens with everyone. I think everyone goes through it at some point. But if it's your first course and you're getting burned out, take a step back. Take a couple of days. The course is still going to be there when you get back. The players are still going to be there when you get back. But step away from it. Go play another game, or just play the actual golf portion of this game if you want to stay in it. But come back, and so when you come back, you're refreshed, and maybe you have a new view of what you get. There's no sense in just drudging through the planting process, which can get to be kind of a drag at times. But there's no sense in putting yourself through that to the detriment of your final publish. You can take a step away and come back to it and chop away at it a little bit at a time.
Yeah, and then just one more point, just my final point for this is I've seen this in the courses not accepted thread on TGC Tours, where a guy gets feedback, their course isn't accepted, and like, okay, I'm going to put that I'm going to use that feedback, and I'll have another course for you next week. And I just go, no, that's way too fast.
Yeah.
You've already missed step 1 of the feedback that you just got.
There's a reason that the TGC Tours design contest usually have like a 2-month window of design time between when it's announced and the courses are ready to be started and when the published window finishes. I mean, 2 months.
Yeah.
And even that's kind of fast for me.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and there's some people that use every last second of that because of life, but also because it takes that much time.
Yeah.
So my number 4 is, I've kind of touched on this already, but a little bit, but do give players room to create angles. It's one of the things I love. I love bend courses. I mean, anybody who's seen my stream and listened to this podcast knows that. B101 courses, I basically love every one of them he's created. I know.
He's great.
There's also like Orion Ranch, Ransom Ranch. Orion is kind of this way too. Revival by McTrees was another one, where you literally had the opportunity to create how you played the course because it was wide open. And so those are maybe a little bit more extreme, but even with a bend course, he's got pretty wide fairways, but there's always a benefit to being on one side of it or another. There's always kind of a preferred line, and then kind of an easier, maybe easier to hit it there, but maybe doesn't give you as good of a shot into the green. And a lot of times you have to actually look and try to figure out what he's been thinking. And I enjoy that. But also sometimes it's, okay, he's intended you to go here, but you choose, well, I'd rather go here because it gives me this. I'd rather have this shot than that shot for this reason.
Because you're better at full shot, 9 irons rather than a partial pitch or something that the intended line may give you.
Yeah, or maybe this angle gives me, I'm going straight up the throat of the green, but this angle, I'm going into the mounds or into the ridges that are there, so they're going to act more as a backstop, right? And so, and maybe it's the short, it's going to be a short club in anyway, so maybe I'm not as worried about the angle now. So I'd rather go over here. But just, giving some room there to give the player that choice. And I think really good designers sometimes will give that room to give that choice and almost trick the player into taking the wrong choice, which I think is really cool.
I
Giving the
was,
player the opportunity to play themselves into the wrong place.
and I was just about to say it kind of goes with the point you had with recovering from a bad drive. Not every bad shot is a shot that ends up in the rough.
Mm-hmm.
There are, Ben in particular and some of these other designers that you mentioned, they build that width into their fairways because it gives an area for a player to miss. But even though you miss and you're still in the fairway, it doesn't mean that your recovery shot is going to be better. Now
Yeah.
you've missed your shot, you're still in the fairway, you have a 98 to 100% lie, but now you're hitting over water that ends
Mm-hmm.
4 feet from the green. Whereas if you'd have played to the left side of that fairway and kept it up there on that slope, you would have had a shot, going straight, like you said, straight down the throat of the green, and you wouldn't have to worry about going over it and going short or missing right. Now
Yeah.
you only have to worry about, maybe missing far right.
Yeah, there was a hole that just comes to mind right now. I just happened to play it yesterday after our design syndicate results show at Remnant 1824. Yeah. Drivable par four, water right, short and right, and it's kind of angled.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's room left that you can bail. Like, so you can decide, okay, I'm going to go for this green, but maybe at the last second, like, oh, I'm not going to be slow. So you really flick the stick forward, right? To make
Yep.
sure you don't slow it in the water. So you're going to go left. You're on dry land. You're safe. But now you've been left with a second shot where the green runs away from you the entire time. And so, yeah, you're not in the water, so that's good.
Mm-hmm.
But you're still being punished somewhat in that you've got a really difficult second shot now, because if you're trying to drive the green, you're trying to make birdie at worst, right?
Sure.
You're not trying to make par doing that. And so I love it when there's bailout areas like that, particularly on longer shots where you're getting there in less regulation. But then the shot you're left with when you bail out is quite difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes it a lot more difficult to get up and down. So there's risk in going for the green, let's say, but there's reward for pulling it off. But then there's a possibility to kind of bail out, but then you're not as well off as you might have been otherwise. I like that kind of thing. I like when you give people room to do that kind of thing as well, and it's not just you're either on the green or you're in the water.
Yeah, and specifically to this point about giving a player angles, I think the newer designers feel like the way that they punish bad shots, the way that they keep the players on the fairway is by lining the fairway, tight fairways, heavy rough, bunkers
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, and that's how they punish bad shots.
Right.
Which goes back to kind of the penal design era of golf,
Yeah.
where you
Yeah.
had these straight line fairways and there were just bunkers everywhere along the sides. And so, yeah, if you hit a shot offline, which back then, how easy was it to hit a shot offline? I mean, basically playing with
Oh,
like polished rocks.
I can tell you.
Yeah. So, but that's how a newer designer kind of looks at it, because it's almost intuitive. When you look at golf and you watch a lot of TV golf and some of the Parkland courses that they're playing with the very tight fairways and stuff, it's almost intuitive that that's how golf is supposed to be. But when you kind of branch out, which will actually go into my next point here, but when you branch out and start looking at other ways to play courses and how other courses are designed, you don't have to have that. You could have a course that is nothing but fairways, or hey, you could have a course that's nothing but green,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You could have a wood duck dunes that is nothing but green,
Yep.
and there are still ways to put a player in a bad position on a miss that does not mean that they're in the rough or in a bunker or in the water.
Yeah.
So do a little, research on that, which will bring me to my next point, which is literally research, research, research. Okay. And although golf course architecture and design can be a fairly dry subject to talk about, especially if you're wanting to really get deep into it and you start going back to the golden age of golf course architecture, or you get even further back to the infancy of golf. It can be interesting, but it's not like reading a comic book or reading a Michael Crichton novel or something. It's not gonna keep you guessing. So you really you really got to be into it if you're going to go this deep. But I think it's worth it in the end, because most tutorial videos online, specifically for this game and designing in this game, or the designers on the forums, TGC forums or otherwise, or Discord chat, can give you pretty good advice on the how part of the designer. How to make this, how to make that, how to plant this. But there are fewer that can answer the why.
Mm-hmm.
As in, why do I need to build risk into my drivable par four? Why do I generally want a wider fairway for a long par five versus a narrow fairway for a short par four? What makes, this is a what, I guess I can rephrase this. Why is Amen Corner at Augusta such a memorable stretch of holes? Could I take those same 3 holes and put them on another course, and would they still be memorable? And my argument to that would be yes, but why? Well, it's because of the shots that they're asking a player to hit. It has nothing to do with the environment, even though, of course, Augusta is beautiful, and I'll say it has nothing to do. It has something to do. But you couldn't take those 3 holes, put them at Cedar Creek Country Club, and get the same kind of response. Let me put it that way. But the design element and why, and the different mix of long irons into a green versus short pitches into a green versus carrying hazards or navigating a ball down a hill around a hazard. Those are the whys, and every element to a professionally designed golf course is there for a reason. Okay, nothing on these golf courses is ever incidental. Now, you could argue that the early links courses, bunkers were created from natural elements, the wind blowing up the sand and all that, but they built the holes around those features so that they became part of the strategy, and there was a reason for them being there. Read websites like thefriedegg.com. They have great short articles with plenty of pictures. If you got to have pictures to go with your words, which in golf course architecture is always a good thing to have. There's a golf course architecture forum over at golfclubatlas.com, which has hundreds of thousands of posts about different topics. Read other people's discussions on hole design, so that when you build your course and people have questions about why you chose to design a certain feature the way that you did, you can answer them. I would say knowing the why to golf course design is even more important than knowing the how. Because when you know the why, if someone asks you why you designed that element, you can say, I did it because of this. And they may argue that point with you, but the thing is, you have a point, you have a reason, because without that underlying knowledge, without knowing the why, anything that's not great on your course is a mistake that could have been prevented. It could have been mitigated if that research had been done, if you'd have answered that why question. And then anything that's awesome on your course really is kind of a happy accident. If people say, wow, that hole had great design, why, how did you come up with doing this? And if you can answer them, it's like, I don't know, I randomly laid down a fairway and that's what I got. I mean, how gratifying is that as a response? I'd much rather say, I did some research on some courses and found that, this was what was, giving PGA players fits, and it was this particular kind of way a fairway snaked in on a approach. And, that's I think not a gratifying answer that someone can get, but I think it's also great that you now have a foundation of knowledge that you can build upon, so that when somebody comes back with a critique of your course and says, oh, I hate this course, the fairways are going all over the place and the greens are doing this, you go like, look, man, there's a reason for that. Because some opinions are awful, okay? Some critiques of courses have no bearing. But if you can't argue with them more than I did it this way because I wanted to, you're not going to have a very good comeback and to them. But if you can say, hey, this is the reason and this is why, I think it puts you on that path that you can use that for every course that you design beyond your first.
Yeah. And to kind of, this is kind of like research, but not reading as much. My final do is do play and watch playthroughs of top designers courses. So World Cup courses, Dream Team courses, National Treasure courses. And I would start with watching playthroughs of, partly because then you're going to get a person's commentary of what they think of the course. And I would be multiple people. So I'm biased towards myself. I think I do a pretty good job. Crazy Canuck 1985 does a bunch. B101 Design does a bunch. There's a few other guys out there too that do them. But they'll be able to, as they're playing, they'll say, here I might have done this differently, or I'm not sure that I like this. And then that'll help you to kind of realize, well, when I create a hole like that, okay, here's how I should do it, maybe, or this. And then to kind of go on top of that is, when you're creating a course, don't be afraid to fire a beta out there and ask people to play it. The number of people that have messaged me after I've done a playthrough of their course and said, wow, it was so cool to watch somebody else play my course. Mm-hmm. I hadn't seen all of those things you talked about, is absolutely staggering to me, because I don't think I'm anything special. I'm just some guy who plays golf. But I guess seeing that other pair of eyes, seeing it through that other pair of eyes, really opens up a designer to some of the things that are going on in their course, both good and bad, that they hadn't realized. So I think that's a really handy thing. And it also will show you what is out there and what is possible. Mm-hmm. And it'll give you an idea of, when you see a course that's being said, this is a great course, you'll see why it's a great course, right? And when there's a course that's maybe not so great, you'll see why it's not so great. I think a lot of people don't realize how good courses can be, and they get frustrated when their mediocre to decent course doesn't get as much praise. And then all I'll say is, well, have you played XYZ course? What did you think of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think playing those contest courses, I would suggest, if you have the time. Not everybody has the time to play every course in the game, obviously, but if you got, especially in those head-to-head contests, if you got a chance to play both those courses and then come up with your own decision about who you think should win, and then see those results come out and see whether or not your opinion maybe matches with, the majority. If you loved one course and then you see in the results, the other course won like 12-0, and you go, like, okay, like, why is my opinion so different than 12 other people? I mean, we played the same courses, and so you can listen to them, hear what they said about the course that you really liked, whether, good or bad, and see where your opinions match or don't match. And if they don't match, ask yourself why. Don't get pigeonholed into your own head, okay? Because this is art, and art is ever changing, and it's evolving all the time. So ask yourself why I feel that way. Do I feel that way just because that's who I want to be, and that's the opinion that I'm gonna have for the rest of my life? Or do I have that opinion because I don't know any different? And so that, I think those contests, like you mentioned, are a great way to kind of test yourself and test how you're viewing these courses, because then you're going to take that viewpoint back to your own course.
For sure. Okay. I'm going to start with the don'ts.
Go for it.
I decided I'm going to.
Hey,
I'm the senior member here. So.
Hey, quarterback's calling an audible, man. I'm out here to evolve with you.
I got you by 10 years, so I'm changing. So my first don't is probably my biggest pet peeve don't in the entirety of the game of golf. Don't try to artificially protect par. It drives me absolutely bonkers when I play a course where it is very obvious that the entire goal of the course is to make par almost impossible to achieve, and to make it like you have offended the designer if you were able to match or break par. I can't stand it. So some examples of it are inaccessible pins. So you've got a 200-yard approach, and often on a par 3. You've got 9 feet from the front of the green to the pin. You've got water or heavy rough or usually bunker in front of the green, so you can't run it on. and then you've got 12 feet of green behind the pin, and it runs off into probably heavy rough usually. And I sit there and I look at it and I go, I've got to hit a 3 or 4 iron into this. I've got basically 21 feet from the front of the green to the back of the green. Not only can I not get this close to the pin, which I'm not necessarily all that upset about not being able to get close to the pin. I can't hit this on the green.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, so I can't go at the pin, but then there's nowhere else I can hit it either. There's no like fat part of the green where I'll leave myself a 30-foot putt or something. There's nothing.
No way to run it up onto the front.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Or it's a green that's 5 feet raised all the time and it's falling off everywhere. And it's like, again, you've got 5 feet either direction of the pin to stop it. It gets to a point where it's luck. It's total fluke luck whether or not you hit the shot, right? All holes are super long and super narrow. So you've got 640-yard par fives that are 10 yards wide, or 520-yard par fours. And again, just rough everywhere. Or you've got just hazards everywhere. So you spend the entire round doing this. I still drop from shoulder height. I haven't got used to the new rule yet.
Rules, Wayne.
Is it?
I don't know if it's against the rules, but I think the rules say knee height now.
Yeah. Well, that's a long way for me to bend down at my age.
I'm sure they got a stick that you can buy off Amazon or something that you can stick your ball on and give you the reach.
I think I have done it once since they changed the rules. Anyways, because I haven't played much. But yeah, where your entire round is just splash, splash, splash. And I think where this comes from is people will be like, okay, it's a video game. Mm-hmm. And maybe they've had experience with the Tiger Woods games where they were super easy, or apparently the original TGC, the golf club game, was really easy. And so they might be like, okay, I got to make this course really tricky to make it hard. Or they just are like, it's a video game and people can hit basically any shot. And they don't realize this game plays relatively realistically. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, they just artificially protect par. Now, here's a problem. The best players in the game are still going to find a way to break par in your course. So on that green that they can't hit the green, they're just going to chip in for birdie. No big deal.
Yeah.
Right? So they're not going to have particularly higher scores as a result of it. Maybe a little bit, but they're still going to shoot crazy scores. But the other 99 or 95 or whatever % of players are just going to go, this course is horrendous. I want nothing to do with it. It's not fun. I can't play golf on this course.
Yeah. So
just don't do it.
Yeah. People want to be challenged, not given an impossible task.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great point, because especially I think now where the game is at with the swing changes and everything, you don't have to do much at all to protect par.
No.
Because people will find their own ways to make par a good score on some holes. So
for sure,
I think you're going to probably see a little bit of an evolution in course design as more and more courses come out post design changes. Yeah. It may not be noticeable to everyone, but I think those of us that look closely at these courses will be able to see where maybe you're not getting quite as long of holes, you're not getting quite as tight of fairways. Maybe there's some hazards that are a bit further. I say further back, but it's actually closer to the tee box than normal, because those red fasts or those red slows are now coming up short. And so you'll see people that are also giving bailout areas or areas to have a miss in areas where they wouldn't normally, because now your misses are going in different spots.
Yeah.
My first don't is, again, for those new designers out there, don't get caught up in the off-course features or complicated objects when you first start off. There is a ton in the designer beyond fairways, greens, and rough. Okay, and it's all mostly pretty cool. And the first time you go in there and you're like, whoa, they got a seaplane in here. Hadn't seen one of those. I'm gonna put a seaplane on my course, or huge cargo ship, or they got a 1.3 million square foot industrial warehouse in there, and you kind of as a designer, you kind of get excited. It's like, oh, there's so many different elements. I can do so much with this. And it starts getting away from what you're actually trying to do, which is build a golf course. Yes, waterfalls are cool. That's a hill I'll die on. I love a good waterfall. I'm sorry. Waterfalls are cool. Tournament objects, can create a neat atmosphere in the hands of the right designer. Building, a neighboring city or homes that line your course can be fun, but it's also very easy to get caught up in that. And then before you know it, when you submit your course and it doesn't get approved, and you come back and you're like, man, I spent 40 hours on that course, and you realize, yeah, but 30 of that was building, this facsimile of downtown Rome in my course, and I didn't do anything with the course itself. And so, I would say if you just absolutely cannot stay away from those objects, because every course needs something, whether it's even just a little clubhouse here, there are some things you want to put in, but build your course and then build those objects to fit your course. Don't try and, fit your course to those objects. I would say don't go in saying I'm going to create a tournament course, and it's going to be like TPC Sawgrass, and I'm going to have the sands everywhere, and or it's going to be like TPC Scottsdale, and I'm going to have that stadium hole. Don't do that, because that's putting restraints on you that frankly a new designer doesn't need, and will hurt you in the end, because you'll paint yourself into a corner in some places, and it won't turn out quite like you want it to.
Yeah, and then speaking about meter as well, those things chew up meter like crazy.
Yeah, like every clubhouse you put in, I mean, clubhouses alone are like 5% in that memory file, not to mention the object meter. So yeah, you start putting those in, and then you wonder why you can't put any more trees on your course. It's because you've put stands along every fairway you got.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and then it's not gonna. It also is not going to be as realistic as you might think it is in your head.
Yeah, for sure. My second don't create multiple all or nothing shots, and by that I mean forced carry, or another one of my pet peeves is the big red sloped ridge like this, where pins here, ridge is like that. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
well, what about for our podcast listeners, Wayne? That they're not going to be able to see your hands.
I was about to get there too. So you have the pin on a flat area, and right in front of it, there's like a 2-foot drop of just red slope, where you either hit it on top and it stays where the pin is, or if you come up a foot short, 5 feet short, 20 feet short, you end up in the same area. Some subtlety can work really, really well on a course. So having more of a yellow ridge, where that one that comes up a foot short ends up, a foot, like however short of the green it's supposed to, and it's proportionally punished based on how far off you are. But yeah, I really dislike it when you can have balls land within 20 or 30 feet of each other and they all end up in the same place. I also dislike it where, again, this is going back to giving people multiple options, but where you're forcing that you have to hit it over this water or over this sand or over this whatever. You don't have any other options. And so like you mentioned, having bailouts and things like that, there's courses where I see where it just doesn't exist. You have to go over this water, and you basically either you make it or you don't, and you get to try again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so another one would be like small island greens. You either hit the green or you get to try that shot again. Again, not really fun. It's artificially protecting par. And to me, it's kind of showing that as a designer, you're not sure how to create strategy in a course yet. And so the only way you know how to make it not be super straightforward is by just making it, really difficult, by making it all or nothing.
Yeah. The easy thing to do in life is to eliminate choices. Okay.
Yeah.
Because And sometimes it's the right thing to do because, okay, quite frankly, I go to my wife and I say, what do you want to eat for dinner? And she gives 5 choices. Well, I got to whittle that down and go down one by one. I say, okay, well, what about this? No, I don't really want that one. Blah, blah, blah. Everybody kind of knows that whole song and dance. Whereas if you give one choice, then it becomes a very easy answer, yes or no. But in golf and as in other things, eliminating choices is not always what people want. People really want those choices to go for it or not, to play a fade or play a draw, to play a low runner or a high ball that gets up into the wind. They want those choices because it allows them creativity on there. And if you eliminate those choices for them to try and get them to either A, play the hole that how you intended, or to find a way to kind of going back to your first point, artificially add difficulty to your golf course, especially when you lean on that as a crutch throughout your course, it becomes old very fast.
Yeah, it does.
One fairway that ends at 290 and doesn't pick back up again at 320 may be forgivable on 1-9. But if I see that 2 or 3 or 4 more times throughout the course, it's just, I'm rolling my eyes and I'm probably not coming back for another one.
Yeah, for sure.
What are we on? Number 2? Yeah, number 2. Don't try and recreate a famous course. You're out of the gate and you're like, I want to make Whistling Straits. I want to make, whatever. Insert course here. Pinehurst number 2. Whatever. Don't come out and try and take on that monster of a task before you're ready, if ever. There are designers out there that have been doing this, since the first game came out, that won't touch a real course because one, sometimes it's just not worth it to them creatively. It's just not something they really want to do. But two, which goes into my next point, is these courses are so popular and so famous that people will nitpick every detail of your course that does not match real life. And there's a famous course out there that everybody wants to play and has been done over and over in this game. And I would say 99% of them are just not good. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the same with most what are called RCRs, real course
recreation.
Yeah, recreations.
Real course recreation,
I think.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. If it's not that, it should be that. And whether they're done with LiDAR data, which is, for people that don't know, LiDAR is basically satellite imagery, laser measuring that can measure the topography of different areas. There's a way in the game, and it's fairly convoluted, so this is kind of dumbing it down a lot. You take the LiDAR data, the topographic data, you upload it into TGC 19. You have to be on PC to do this. You start a new course in TGC 19, you load that data in, it builds the plot of land to match that data you've put in, and then you import that course over into PGA Tour 2K. So now you have the plot of land, and there are different ways that you can also build the holes. But even that, even taking that and trying to build, build your Pebble Beach or whatever, is a very, very difficult undertaking because these people will say, well, hold on, that tree is not right there. Or, there's only so many types of trees in the game, and there's only so many shapes of trees in the game. And they'll say, that tree doesn't look like that. Hey, that tree's an ash, not an oak. What's this guy doing? Or, hey, this green actually slopes, more left to right over in this area, than this. And they will nitpick your course to death.
Yeah.
I haven't seen, with the exception of maybe one, I haven't seen anybody out there just lauding someone's course recreation, there's some, when someone asks the question like, hey, is there a Pinehurst in the game that I can play? Some people throw out, 5 or 6 different versions, and they're all meh, but no one's out there going, yeah, you need to play this one because this is the definitive. It's like you're out there on the course.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, and the top designers in the game won't even touch it at times. So,
And and for me, it's more interesting to play courses that people have created on their own rather than something that already exists.
absolutely. I mean,
So,
yeah, are there players out there that love nothing more than to play Augusta and Whistling Straits and all that? Sure, yeah,
sure.
but even for me, even if they had every PGA course in this game, after I was done playing them, I would want to try some different courses. I want to
Yeah.
see what other people have come up with that doesn't exist in real life. So
Yeah.
there is that element to it.
I think that's the biggest strength in the game.
Absolutely.
Number 3, don't use the same objects over and over and over and over and over for the sake of using them, just for the sake of using them. So you mentioned one, the pinched fairway at 290, or the fairway just ends at 290. Again, like you said, do it once, as long when it makes sense to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I've absolutely played holes that end at 290, the fairway, and you understand completely why it does, and the hole plays great. Okay. Keep doing it. We're going to have issues. The centerline hazard, where there's no difference between going left and right. So what I mean by that is a good centerline hazard will have kind of a wider or easy to hit side, and maybe a narrower or more difficult side to hit side. The easier to hit side will usually leave you with a less advantageous shot to the green than the side that's harder to hit. So for like a par 5, maybe you have to go to the narrower or harder side to hit to be able to get to the green in 2.
Mm-hmm.
For a par 4, maybe that gives you a way better angle going to that route rather than the easier side to hit. What I'll see a lot though is basically the hazard usually will be a bunker, but doesn't always have to be. It'll be right smack in the middle. Both sides are equally wide, and all it's doing is narrowing the fairway. That's its entire purpose. Going right or left makes no difference at all. You have the same angle, same shot in, whatever like that. And then the other one you see is island greens. Just to have an island green. It doesn't really add to the hole. A lot of times it takes away from the hole. And I saw one course that had 4 of them, 4 island greens. And the first one, you're kind of like, okay, well, there's the island green. Second one, you're like, okay, one was probably good. And then you get to like the third and the fourth, and you're just kind of like, okay, like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
This is a bit much. So when you're using, and when you're seeing people creating centerline hazards or pinching fairways or cutting them off completely or having island greens or any of these other things, again, understand why. Going back to Jay's point a little while ago, why are they doing it? What is it how is it adding to the golf course? How is it adding to the strategy? How is it adding to it visually? What's the purpose behind it? And then if you understand that, then okay, sure, go ahead and use it, but don't have it be every single hole or every other hole. Use it sparingly, and then, because then that makes that hole special rather than just one of the many center line or pinched or whatever holes.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I think you can almost see, almost tell the progression of a designer by the course they've put out. A new designer putting out their first publish. Most of the time, there's going to be some elements in there that you're going to tell, okay, this guy's getting into the designer, or this girl's getting into the designer, and they're messing around with a few things here, but they don't quite know how to sculpt. They don't quite know how to, build, rock formations or whatever they're trying to do. Then you get into the next tier that have those kind of strategic design elements like you're talking about, like a centerline hazard, which certainly has its place in some golf courses and in some holes. And so they've done a little bit of research. They've looked at some stuff and they see, okay, a centerline hazard, but they haven't quite answered that why question just yet. And so their best assumption is that, hey, it's a centerline hazard. It's going in the center line. And the only reason it's there is to add, a bit of difficulty and a penal nature to the hole. Well, that's not necessarily what its use is on the holes that incorporate it to a good extent. But that's they're kind of making those steps, those progressive steps in their design. And so their next, their next level up moment is going to be when they figure out that why, and then the next time they design a center line hazard, it's going to make sense and make strategic sense, instead of being that element that gets repeated throughout. Number 3 for me is, it's going to have a little bit to do with your point as well. Don't try and design a course that pleases everyone. And specifically, don't try to design a course that you think a reviewer at TGC is going to like. Don't try to design a course that you think all the platinum TGC Tours players are going to like, or whatnot, because there's not a course out there that is universally beloved. Okay, you ask 10 different fans of the game what their favorite course is, and you're going to get 10 different answers. And you're going to get some that hate courses that are generally loved. So you're not going to be able to please everyone. So design for yourself. Have a goal in mind, and then try and execute that. Try and keep your style, of course, consistent throughout. Don't try and blend in, hey, I want a couple of holes that play more link style, so I'm going to have some really wide fairways and lots of undulations, and ball's going to be able to roll up onto the green. And then you follow that up with, tree-lined parkland, because I really want this dogleg par 5 to be really hard. And so I'm going to put a bunch of trees down this one, and have a really sharp, almost 90-degree dogleg. You're trying to give somebody a little bit of everything. And when you do that, you start building in gimmicks. Okay. And you think, okay, well, my course needs a Biarritz green, because that's a cool thing, and I've seen it and it seems unique. My course needs a bunker in the middle of the green, because I've seen it and it looks unique and it's fun. Well, the reason those things are unique is because they are few and far between. And it's not even because they're necessarily good things. I think there's a huge argument to be made that bunker in the middle of the green at Riviera is an awful design feature. Now, there's going to be people that argue the other way, but I don't think it's anything special. But people will see it and go, oh, it's on a PGA course. I'm going to put it in mine because it's going to make my course special.
Well, another example would be the road hole at St. Andrews. That is a unique hole. I guarantee you, if somebody tried to create that hole today, they would get roasted, because it's extreme. That hole is extreme.
Oh yeah.
But because it's at St. Andrews, because it's the home of golf, it gets a bit of a pass, right? And Riviera, I think, kind of does it a little bit too. And so keep that in mind.
Yeah, and there are going to be holes out there that you want to steal ideas from, not outright copy, because if you try to recreate number 12 at Augusta in your course, it's going to get seen, and people are going to notice it. No matter how you dress it up, people are going to notice it, and they're going to say, "Oh, this is it's number 12 from Augusta." Yeah. So don't try and throw all these different gimmicky elements in there because you think you got to spice up your course so that people will find it interesting, and everybody's going to have the guys that enjoy links courses are going to have their links. The guys that enjoy parkland courses are going to have their parkland. You want island greens, we got island greens. You want waste areas, we got waste areas. It's all just going to be a big stew of nothing in the end, and it's not going to be the cohesive course. Sometimes, and this goes back to my first keep it simple. Okay. There's a there's a huge difference between bland and simple. Okay. And there are great courses out there that are simple. Doesn't mean easy, but it's kind of one of those things, one it when you see it. Sometimes very much less is more.
For sure. And kind of keeping with that train of thought, my number 4 don't create extreme dog legs or extreme elevation changes. So again, the old less is more, right? Extreme dog legs, and I'm talking like you mentioned, the 90% dog or 90-degree dog leg story, where as a crow flies, maybe it's 320, but because of how it's designed, it plays like it's 40, right? And again, it's very much, you have to hit it out here to this corner, and then you have to go this way, because often it'll be tree lined all the way, so you can't cut it or anything, or it'll be out of bounds on the inside or stuff like that. And it just to me, it smacks of either just artificially lengthening a hole, or maybe a routing issue where you've kind of had to shoehorn this length of hole in there
Yeah.
in order to have your overall all yardage be up there, or you're going to hoop your routing later because you created this basically L-shaped hole in there. And now you got to work around that. And often it ends up meaning another big dog leg's coming, which it again gets old. The elevation changes. This one, I think, is it fun to stand on a 300-foot high drive and hit a fairway down like 300 feet and watch the ball be in the air for 25 seconds and it goes 400 yards? Yeah, can be fun. Is it good golf design? No, not really. When do you ever see that in real life? So maybe a 50 foot drop would work. And I think that's what happens a lot, is that people will create like that multiple 100-foot drop when maybe 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 feet would create the same effect, but would play just way better, right?
Yeah, or you break up the elevation changes where, your tee shot is 30 feet down to a landing area, and then it's another, 30 feet from there to the green, so that it's not 60 feet or 100 feet straight down to your landing area and then straight out to the green. You kind of break it up to create more interest there.
And then the other thing when you're doing elevation changes is, when you go down, you do have to come back up at some point. And if you create like really significant downhill slopes, you're gonna have to come back uphill at some point. And those holes, I mean, an extreme uphill hole very rarely plays at all well. So just again, keeping it simple, keeping it subtle, less is more in those two areas, I think is a really important one.
Yeah, and I think some people would come back at you, Wayne, and say, but Augusta has huge elevation changes. Augusta has 120 feet elevation change on a single hole, and I mean the way you argue back against that is like, okay, yeah, but Augusta was designed by Alistair McKenzie, and that's a designer that knows what he's doing and knows how to use those elevation changes and knows at each point along that hole what the golfer is going to be looking at and what they're going to be asked to do, and is it possible at every point along that way, which is not something that can be said for every designer that goes in there and drops their first green 150 feet down. I mean, Crooked Arrow, my first 18-hole course, if you haven't heard me talk about it before, I have 2 par 3s. The first with an elevation change of 150 feet, and the second with an elevation change of something like 75 feet. And the second one is to an island green. Imagine that, a first published with an island green. How original. It is hard to do and effectively, because then a new player comes out to your course and they get up there and they go, I have no idea how to play this hole.
What club do I hit?
What? Yeah, it's 150 yards to the pin, but I'm also 150 feet down. Like, and then I got, a 6 mile an hour wind at my back. Can I club down enough? Do I just need to putt this one off the tee box and try to get it close? Yeah. It's not a great feature all the time unless it's done with particular care and caution, which can only come from that experience.
Yeah. And my point with Augusta is that was what the land demanded that they do as well. That the land was already there, that it had hills. They weren't going to be able to shave all these hills off. So they used the land and created the holes that way. And you're talking about number 10. Yeah. But then they created 10 in a way that hole makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it also makes sense. And like you were talking about earlier with the routing, with going back uphill at some point, there are ways to do it where you're getting where you need to go. But it takes a smart designer to be able to take something that says, okay, I got to go up 75 feet because I just came down 75 feet. How do I do it effectively? And that's a hard thing to do. I think that's where you get into a lot of that unintentional blindness that some people have on their new courses because they don't necessarily know how to make those elevation changes. My fourth one is it's not as serious as maybe some of these others, but it's just a bit of advice. Don't name your course until you're finished, until you're ready to publish, because um, having a name in mind and using that as inspiration for your course is never going to really turn out that well. Also, a lot of the names that I see for courses are fairly unoriginal. Try and avoid a lot of the popular words, the dunes, pines, cliffs, whispering, whistling, skipping,
Mm.
whatever. Royal, if it's in a name that you can remember 5 courses with that same thing off the top of your head, maybe go check out a thesaurus and come up with something, a little different. The reason being is, in the end, the name doesn't mean much, but you want it to be memorable because you want your course to stand out amongst the thousands and thousands of other courses out there. And if you put out the third, not the third, the 3000th Pine Valley, or, Valley Ridge, or anything else like that, it's going to get lost. And when you tell people,
Mm.
hey, go check out my course, Sandy Dunes, well, they go in and they type in Sandy Dunes, and there's 10 courses that pop up. And
Yeah, they can't find it.
unless you've designed on the same platform that they have, they're not going to see your name, and so they can't even use the designer's name, to pick out your course. And so you have, a chance to get lost. But if you take a look at some of these design contests from TGC, and you see the names that these guys are coming up with, now a lot of them are kind of out there in terms of, am I really going to be able to not only remember this name but remember how to spell it? Maybe not. But then again, you don't have to, because they're getting the exposure. You're going to be able to see their stuff. So, but they keep the name of their course as original as the course itself, because it's going to be the first impression that someone has with your course, the name, and then that thumbnail picture that you choose. So try and be original. Come up with some different words out there. Go check out a map and find some cool city names or geographical locations that have some neat names there, and put your own spin on it, so that when someone sees your course for the first time, they're thinking, hey, I like this. Tatanka Falls. I've never seen, even though Falls is probably heavily overused. I hadn't seen something like that before, so I'm already a little bit interested in what this has in store for me.
Yeah. Okay, we're into our last don'ts, which is good because I'm supposed to race in 5 minutes. Um,
Quick, lightning round.
so this one's gonna be quick. Don't penalize so harshly on risk reward holes that it makes the player not want to take on the risk. So you've got a small island par 5 green. So the second shot you're trying to hit 3-wood in, and you're like, I'm just not going to try it. Or you've got OB surrounding a par 4 where you're just like, it's not worth the risk. I'm just going to lay up. Give the play incentive to try to take on the shot. While yes, have risk, there's a balance to be had. The risk and the reward, where it's not just an obvious go for it. Make it where the player has to decide, do I want to take this on? Do I not? It's a tough balance to get right, but yeah, don't make it to the point where it's just not even worth trying it.
Absolutely. My final one's a quick one too. Kind of said it throughout all of our podcasts. Really, don't take all the praise for your course without taking some amount or the same amount of criticism for that. Have pride in your work, but don't close your mind to those that have critiques or suggestions. Most people are just trying to help in their own way. Some are more tactful with their help than others, but everyone's just trying to help. And whether you take that criticism on board or not, that's going to be up to you. But at least be gracious that they took the time to play your course. It's one more play, which is what you wanted in the first place, right? And so, be thankful that they're interested and that they took the time. And then behind closed doors in your own time, figure out whether or not you want to take that criticism on board, and be honest with yourself about if it's a place that you can improve.
Yeah. And as somebody who streams playing courses and providing feedback on courses, I can promise you it is never my intent to insult or to put somebody down their effort of their course that they've created, to the point where I have a policy where I won't play courses that are just making fun of somebody. My reason for giving feedback is to try to help that person be better.
Unless you're tricked into it.
Unless I'm tricked into it, yeah. But yeah, again, take what reviewers say, take the parts that make sense, use it. The parts that don't make sense, just ignore it. This is a cool list. Really fun podcast we've done here. For our next podcast, we're going to have somebody on who's going to be able to speak about the review process for courses that go into the TGC Tours database. Mm-hmm. So if you have any questions you want us to ask him, feel free to leave them in the comment section of the YouTube video, at our Twitter handle, either one of our Twitter handles, either one of our streams, our Discords, wherever you can get a hold of us. Feel free to put that question in there, and we'll make sure we talk to them about it. And it'll be a great opportunity for you to get an inside look at what goes into, what are the decisions that get made, what are the criteria that are used to decide whether or not a course is put into the database or it's tour worthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great opportunity. If you've got a question about, why you're not why your course specifically, we're not gonna ask those questions, but why a course may not be approved, or what puts it over the top, or how does the course get scheduled, things like that. Right. Drop us a line. We'll get those out there. We'll ask the hard hitting journalism questions. That's what we're all about here.
That's right. And with that, I'm just going to say have a great week, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Please continue giving feedback. I love the positive feedback we've been getting. I appreciate it. Keep it coming. It helps us know that you like what we're doing.
We're 69th in the UK in the games podcast category. So thanks for that, guys.
Can only be a good thing there. But yeah, thanks. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.